one of the things that we want to talk about, because we always stress buying local, shopping local. We do that statewide so we can help out the local businessmen. And one of the things that you want to get out there, and because we kind of give and take here a little bit about outdoor related information on this show, it's about retailers, the internet, and taxes. Can you just go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, this is an age-old debate that's been going on since the Supreme Court ruled in 1992 that if a company somewhere in the country, in this case a mail order company, it was a Quill mail order, but now it applies to the internet. If any of these companies do not have a presence in your state, then the way the tax that is due and payable on a transaction is collected is different. For example, if the local hardware store sells a widget in Greenwood, Arkansas, because it's located in Arkansas, that company has to collect the applicable sales tax and then send it at the end of the month back to the state of Arkansas for distribution, back to Greenwood, back to Sebastian County, to the state, all of the people that receive sales tax funds. And by the way, these are all taxes voted on by the people. But if that same widget is sold by Acme online in Pennsylvania, because it's not located in Arkansas, even though the tax is still due, that company doesn't have to collect it. That means that the person that bought the widget is supposed to fill out a form and send that money to the state. And and I know that's not happening. So two very important critical things are happening as a result of this phenomenon. And we all know what's going on with the internet. It's just booming. One, we're putting our retailers out of business. They can't compete. They're showrooms. People go in there, look at the widget, kick the tires on the widget, and then they buy it online because they're not collecting that tax up there, and the consumer's not paying it. So that's the first thing, is we're hardshipping our retailers in a profound way. They're going out of business. The second thing we're doing is the sales tax that would normally be collected, or the use tax for an out-of-state purchase that's not being collected, is being denied the state, Sebastian County, City of Greenwood, for the things that it's designed to pay for. Now, at the end of the day, none of us want to pay more taxes, but I think we should all be paying the taxes that are due and payable by law, particularly those that we have imposed on ourselves. So what my bill would do is it would treat the transaction the same no matter where it happens. That's why it's called Remote Transaction Parity Act, RTPA. That if you buy the widget, no matter where you buy the widget, the company that's going to sell the widget to you is going to collect the due and payable tax and distribute it back to the state like they would if they were downtown Greenwood. Now that levels the playing field for your local merchants, and the tax gets collected that goes to police and fire and parks and streets and those kinds of things. So I want to make one other point about this, Jim, before we leave the subject, and that is this. For those listening that think, well, he's just wanting me to pay more taxes. No, I honestly want you to pay the taxes that are due and payable by law. And I argue with a lot of my conservative brethren who don't support the bill that conservative values, particularly about free enterprise, about states' rights, and those kinds of things, are important values for the health and well-being of our economy. But I also believe that it has never been a conservative value that we help people evade paying due and collectible taxes. That's never been a conservative value. And the failure of Congress to intervene in this subject simply means that we are helping people violate the law by withholding from the proper jurisdictions the due and collectible taxes on certain purchases. So I think you fix two things with it. I think you help your local merchants because it makes them more competitive. And number two, the political subdivisions get the money with which we are relying on them to provide basic services that all of us utilize.
So Arkansas is suffering from not collecting those taxes. And there's another subject that we're going to leave that subject now, and we're going to go into the clean line energy. And that could also be detrimental to Arkansas as well.
Yeah, a clean line is simply a process by which a company is trying to take generated power from west of Arkansas and build a big transmission line with which they can take this current across the state of Arkansas with the purpose of selling that power at the other end to the Tennessee Valley Authority or some other power pool. So we're basically we would be the super highway. They would cross our state to do that. Well, now, the way you get energy transmission across the state of Arkansas typically is to make your application, and it goes before a state regulatory authority called the Public Service Commission, and they take it under consideration, and they decide whether or not that is a viable energy solution good for the state of Arkansas. But in this case, because it is not a regulated utility in Arkansas, Clean Line, they have gone to the federal government to ask for permission to use a little-known section, 1222, to have the capacity to use the powers of eminent domain to literally take land from Arkansas landowners with which to construct these power lines and cross our state. I've just said, look, it ought to be treated just as if it's a regulated utility in the state of Arkansas. I don't care if they're selling power in the state or not. You shouldn't have the authority to condemn land in our state from people who don't want to give that land up for whatever purpose without having the approval of the State Public Service Commission. So we have introduced legislation. Senator Bozeman has introduced legislation. We are trying to make a convincing argument to the Department of Energy that they shouldn't give this special authority to Clean Line for condemnation purposes, and that process is still unfolding as we speak. So that's where we stand, and look, there are a lot of people tuned in right now that may have property subject to this that are probably going, amen, brother. But we haven't heard the end of it yet, and we're still working on it.
Well, I know for a fact that Clean Line has thrown several parties down in Little Rock for legislators trying to swing their votes. And I know, like you said, I know some listeners that part of their land is in the domain.
Yeah, well, we just simply think that, look, I'm not saying I'm against eminent domain, because as a mayor, I've used it for road projects and other things vital to the community. But there's a process for it, and I don't think the federal government ought to be giving special exemptions to an out-of-state company to take land from private landowners in our state without it having the approval of the governor, the legislature, and the Public Service Commission, and that's what our bill basically says has to happen if it was to be signed into law.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for these topics, and we could. I think you and I could sit here all day and talk about things very easily.
I'd love to go back and talk about deer hunting,
and that's what we want to end it on. As far as deer hunting, how are you going to end up this year? I mean, you going to pull that trigger?
Well, I'm hopeful that our legislative calendar will be a little more favorable. You know, we've had a couple of flirts with government shutdowns and those kinds of things. I remember I spent New Year's Eve in Washington, 2 or 3 years ago, because we couldn't get our business done. I'm hopeful that Congress will be able to get its work done. We can get back, and I can get in the groove and get my weekends out during Modern Gun and sit in that deer stand with my rifle and have that opportunity at a legitimate shot. And if it doesn't come to pass, then so be it. But I just don't get those many opportunities to really go out there and enjoy hunting. I know it's a big time in Arkansas. I do a little duck hunting too when I can get down to southeast Arkansas specifically. So that's a big part of what I do to get away from the grind of being a Washington, D.C., Northwest Arkansas congressman.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. And once again, you're listening to Jim Reynolds Outdoors, and we'll be back in just a moment.